Hello, my name is John Kane. I'm a sergeant currently assigned to the Internal Affairs Bureau. Um, some of you may know me, some of you may not, but for about the last 10 years I have been responsible for grading all of the essays written for assignments in the training academy for the sergeant's positions, DTU, recruit training, and the FTO, the 6-month temps. A lot of times I get questions, especially after, when people want to understand what they could have done better, how they can be more successful. So I thought this time, why not try to provide something that you can listen to, look at before you take the exam. First off, I want to say I'm going to do 2 sections. This first video will be about um, writing, grammar, punctuation, spelling, that kind of thing. We'll do a second video that has to do with essay structure. Those are the 3 things I grade on. I grade on grammar, I grade on spelling, and I grade on essay structure, which, like I said, will be explained in the next video. The reason that's important to realize is because one thing you didn't hear me say I grade on is style. We're not looking for, or I'm not looking for, Shakespeare, so to speak. To steal a phrase from Sergeant Reardon, one of the best strategies, if you're not comfortable writing, one of the best strategies is write like a 3rd grader. If the assignment, and I'll say this, I'm going to use a couple examples. I have no idea if these are going to be the topic. I don't know what the topic is. I won't know what the topic is until after you've written them and they've been sent to me. But these are just some things I've made up myself, or maybe some ones have been recycled in the past. Let's say you are asked to create a training scenario. There is nothing wrong with sentences like, I will do this, the recruit will do this, the safety officer will do this, so on and so forth. As long as the words are spelled correctly and the punctuation is there, I'm not going to say, oh yeah, they make the point, but boy, it's just not a very good read. That's not what we're looking for. So if you are not comfortable with some word choices or sentence structures, don't worry about it. Use words you know. Don't use words that you think, oh, maybe that one sounds better, because what might happen is you end up using a word that doesn't exactly mean what you think it means. We all do these things to try to, and me included, we all do these things to try to make ourselves sound smarter. For instance, how many times have you ever used the phrase due to the fact that? We did this, we didn't do this, due to the fact that. Well, why not just say because? Well, because doesn't sound as impressive as due to the fact that, or another one, at this point in time, which just means now. But we don't like saying that because at this point in time sounds better. Use words you know. Use language you know. Write in a style that you are comfortable with. Don't try to sound like somebody else. Worst thing you can do on game day is to try to play a different way than you've ever been practicing. So, and your practice is just in your daily writing. Simple sentences, simple language. So let's talk a little bit about some of the grammar problems I see. There are really 2 punctuation marks that cause the most problems, and I'm sure you can guess the first one, commas. Commas are confusing, and if nothing else, is because probably along your life you've been told several different reasons or why you would use a comma. The biggest mistake I see with commas is someone using a comma to join 2 complete sentences. Remember, that's an error called a comma splice, and it's never correct. You either need to make those 2 complete sentences, or you can throw a semicolon in there. That'd be okay. But if you just join 2 sentences, I will be in charge of simunitions, comma, they will be in charge of officer safety. That's a comma splice. That's 2 sentences joined with a comma. The second punctuation I see, and not just in essay exams, but just in my daily work, apostrophes. A lot of times people use apostrophes to make a word plural, but that's not what it's for. An apostrophe shows ownership. So for instance, the officers arrived on scene. I will see an apostrophe after the S. Well, that's not supposed to be there. if you put an apostrophe in a word, like officers or recruits or instructors or whatever, the very next thing better be something that person owns. So for instance, the officer's cruiser. The officer's cruiser was parked on the street. Okay, in that case, I need an apostrophe. And if it's more than one officer, it comes after the S. If it's just one officer, it comes before the S. And it can be, emotions. The officer's anger. We don't own anger, but we're saying that the anger is possessed by that officer. A standard I like to try to use, and what I teach the recruits when I teach report writing, is if you find yourself going to use a punctuation, ask yourself, why am I using it? If you can't answer that question, chances are either you don't need it or you need something else. Especially the commas and apostrophes. Another not quite so much is the hyphen, and I'll tell you where this comes into play. There's a couple of them. For instance, using that scenario one, scenario-based training. Well, that should be hyphenated. Division issue taser. Division issue should be hyphenated. There's some other ones, on-duty officer, off-duty officer. So there are some in there where they need to be used. Now keep this in mind also. No matter how many times you misuse a punctuation, it's only counted as one error. So if you use a comma wrong in 14 places, that's just one error. However, they can start to mount up quickly. So if you mess up an apostrophe and a comma, then those are your two. The instructions will tell you you can have 3 errors in grammar, 3 errors in spelling. No more than 3 in either one, and no more than 6 combined. So, you mess up 2 punctuation and then misspell 4 words, and that's a failure. And there's nothing I can do about that. It's either right or it's wrong. You either used it correctly or you didn't. It's either spelled correctly or it's not. There's no interpretation on that. I'm not trying to give you a license to say, well, hey, I can mess this up 14 times, it's only 1. That's true. But when there's only 3, those can come up kind of quickly. Watch out for words that sound the same. I'll tell you some places people mess up. There, and there. Those are 3 different words. The THEY apostrophe RE is pretty easy. Ones like that, your, we're, so on and so forth, because you can just say both words. So instead of saying, it's cold outside, well, can I say it is cold outside? Oh yeah, that makes sense. But if I say, the dog is in its house, the dog is in it is house, no, that doesn't make sense. So separate them out. Some of them you just have to know, once people mess up, then and than. Remember, than is a comparison. He is taller than she is. She is faster than he is. I am older than they are. That's than. Even though when we pronounce it, we really do say then. And that's why it's hard, because we do say then, but the word is than. So than is a comparison. Then has to do with time and chronology. Similar ones, typos. The word and when you wanted an, or and when you wanted and. The word form when you wanted from. These are things that spell check is not going to catch because they are real words. Spell check, for the most part, only checks, is this really a word? Sometimes it'll let you know if the blue squiggly line underneath, it'll say, hey, are you sure you didn't mean this other one? But you can't rely on spell check, which comes to one of my next points. Try to leave yourself time to review. Leave yourself time to reread. Although you can't read out loud, obviously, while you're taking the test, a good strategy is to just speak the words even if you don't voice them. So, it causes you to read it and actually look at each word, because you know what you meant to say. So if you just scan it with your eyes, your brain is actually going to fill in and fix a lot of things that you might not see. And this happens to all of us. It happens to me on a daily basis. Another strategy, if you have time, is to start reading from the end and go back, because it forces your mind to look at it a different way as opposed to just looking at it in order. I think the final thing I want to mention is verb tense. If you're asked to create a scenario, then you might say this will happen. That's future tense. Make sure you use future tense. Maybe at some point they're going to ask you, describe how or describe a training you attended and what you thought of that and how it impacted you. Well, that should be past tense because it happened in the past. People will switch between past and present, future and present, so on and so forth. So once you've determined what you're being asked, you'll determine what tense to use. Just try to keep it consistent. I'm looking at my notes. I think those are all of the things I had wanted to talk about. Watch out for 2, 2, and 2. Whether you want TO or TOO, make sure you know the difference. As I said, there'll be a following video that will talk about essay structure. At the end of that one, I'll give you my contact information if you have any questions. Meanwhile, I wish you luck, and please move on to the next one if you think it will help. Thanks.